In Guatemala, a general strike began this Thursday to demand the resignation of President Alejandro Yamatei and the Attorney General, both accused for corruption. In Cuba, vaccination for pregnant and breastfeeding women using the Abdala vaccine began this Thursday. More anger in the West Bank after the Israeli occupation forces killed a 12-year-old Palestinian boy. Welcome to TeleSUR English. I am Denise Herrera and this is from the South. In Guatemala, various social sector, indigenous and farmer groups began a general strike this Thursday to demand the resignation of President Alejandro Yamatei and the Attorney General, both accused of corruption. Thousands took to the streets in protest over state mismanagement and the government's apparent unwillingness to tackle corruption, which has extended to the lack of transparency in the distribution of vaccines and the health crisis. Pressure has been building since Attorney General Consuelo Porras fired the country's anti-corruption special prosecutor Juan Francisco Sandoval on July 23rd. Sandoval said after his firing that is as investigation got closer to Yamatei and members of the cabinet. Porras made efforts to block him. In Peru this Saturday, President Pedro Castillo attended a symbolic swearing-in ceremony in Ayacucho, where the independence of Peru was decided on the battlefield. During the act in the southern Peruvian highland, President Castillo was presented with a staff symbolic of leadership in the indigenous Quechua culture by the mayor of Huamanga province as part of the program attended by leaders and diplomats from Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, and Argentina, as well as Peruvian Congress members. Traditional performances and award ceremony were held at the historic site, where an imposing 44-meter-high marble obelisk stands, a tribute to the compatriots who fought in the Battle of Ayacucho on December 9, 1224, achieving the independence of Peru from Spanish colonial rule. In Colombia, a migratory crisis in the northwestern department of Antioquia has led to the collapse of public services and sparked fears of a massive outbreak of COVID-19. Some 10,000 people are stranded in the municipality of Nicococli, from where they hope to cross into Panama, which has closed its border en route to the United States. Local officials said some 800 more people arrived daily, and many of whom have paid large sums to human traffickers before being abandoned to their fate. Local authorities have called on the national government to provide aid and resources to prevent a humanitarian disaster, but the requests have fallen on deaf ears.
We've gone over the plan with the Minister of the Interior, who directly and through the Vice Ministers has coordinated actions with the governors and mayors. Also, we've broadly approached the Mayor of Necoclí, with whom we have consolidated a line of action. In this way, we have also spoken with the Minister of Defense on the purpose of reinforcing the border crosses in Nariño, actions that will be led by the Minister Diego Molano, ahead of the armed forces, especially the Army and the National Police. All of this I said to conclude that on the coming August 5th, we have summoned the Intersectorial Commission Against Migratory Traffic for technical assessment. The commission will be presided by the Chancellor of the Republic and requires the assistance of mayors of the region, who are to discuss a plan of action that the national government will present in order to support Necoclí.
Chile has sent French protests to demand the immediate release of political prisoners detained during the October 2019 anti-government demonstrations. Social, political, and human rights organizations rallied in front of the Supreme Court of Justice in the capital, Santiago, to demand the immediate release of the hundreds and many young people who have remained behind bars without trial for almost 2 years. Relatives of the prisoners called for the immediate approval of the General Pardon Bill presented by opposition senators. A tsunami warning issued for part of the state of Alaska has been lifted after a strong 8.2 magnitude headquarter struck off coast on Wednesday night. The quake, the strongest since 1964, was located about 56 miles east of Perryville, Alaska, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, at 29 miles deep. The headquarters is considered shallow. There have been at least 2 strong aftershocks, including a preliminary magnitude 6.2 and magnitude 5.6. While the tsunami warning was cancelled, the situation is being monitored. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said they will request Russia's support to deploy guards along his country's border with Azerbaijan. Following recent clashes, Russia played a key role and immediately an end to the conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh region last year.
It makes sense to consider the question of stationing outposts of Russian border guards along the entire stretch of the Armenian-Azerbaijani border, which will help the two countries to carry out work on demarcation and delimitation of the border without the risk of military clashes. We are planning to discuss the matter with our Russian colleagues.
Russia's lab meteor successfully docked with the International Space Station on Thursday, 8 days after it was launched. The module will provide additional crew quarters, a new toilet, and water and oxygen generation equipment, improving the condition of cosmonauts' stay on the station and increasing the safety of the entire International Space Station crew. The module will also be a new science facility, docking port, and a spacewalk airlock for future operations. In Russia, fires were recorded in the Siberia region that affected approximately 1.5 million hectares for the taiga swamp forest on conifers. The Russian Forest Protection Air Service team announced that they are patrolling miles of firewalls that have been dug in the vicinity of various quills to prevent the flames from advancing. This is the third consecutive year to the Republic records forest fire that have overflowed the Forest Protection Air Services. The brigade will continue their work to extinguish the fire. In Turkey, 3 people died and more than 100 were injured in fires that spread over tourist areas in the south coast of the country. Turkish authorities launched an investigation into suspected arson at 4 tourist sites in the city of Antalya. The disaster office reported that among deaths is an 82-year-old man and at least 122 wounded in the fires in the area surrounded by hotels and resorts. Well, we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. In Cuba, vaccination for pregnant and breastfeeding women using the Abdullah vaccine began this Thursday, prioritized as a vulnerable group. Health authorities announced that some 800 women will receive the first of 3 doses of the Abdullah vaccine by Friday. Previously, certified vaccination centers were selected in all municipalities, and the vaccination drive will begin with pregnant women aged 19 and over who are in the 2nd or 3rd semester of the pregnancy. Vietnam and Cuba are set to work together to produce vaccines against the novel coronavirus. In a telephone conversation with the Cuban ambassador, the Vietnam Prime Minister Pham Minh Chinh underlined the interest in the cooperation with the Caribbean island to obtain licenses, supplies, and technology transferred to produce vaccines. The official also highlighted the historical ties between the two nations and noted the vote of making efforts to overcome the difficulties caused by COVID-19 and the enhanced collaboration in this and various other fields. Uruguay's Ministry of Public Health announced it will offer all those vaccinated with China's Sinovac jabs and booster shot of Pfizer. The news comes as the Delta variant was detected in the country less than 2 weeks ago, and it's hoped that it will increase the population immunity to COVID-19. People will be able to receive the Pfizer booster 90 days after receiving the second of the CoronaVac shots. Authorities announced that the country has purchased enough Pfizer doses to cover the almost 1.5 million people eligible for a booster shot. Uruguay has fully vaccinated more than 61% of its population using vaccine produced by Sinovac, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca, according to the Health Ministry data. The Pan American Health Organization has warned that Latin America and Caribbean face an avalanche of worsening health issues if COVID-19 disruption of health services continues. PAHO Director Caricia Etienne stressed that the situation threatens immunization of children and care of Spain mothers and people with chronic conditions. She added that in a recent survey of health services in the region, 97% of the participating countries and territories reported disrupted health services, while 55% reported disruption in at least half of their health services. Over 300,000 children, mostly in Mexico and Brazil, have missed routine immunization, leaving them vulnerable to deadly yet preventive infections.
Last week, there were over 1,200,060 COVID-19 cases in nearly 20,000 deaths, only in the Americas. COVID-19 is still having disastrous effects in our region, where Argentina, Colombia, Cuba, Ecuador, and Paraguay are among the countries that report the highest mortality levels at a weekly rate in all the world. The cases have overly duplicated in the United States last week, mainly in non-vaccinated people. Mexican states of Baja California, Quintana, and Yucatan also registered a rise in new infections.
Portugal is set to begin winding down COVID-19 pandemic restrictions ahead of forecast 70% of people being fully vaccinated by the end of this summer. The health minister reported that so far 52% of the target population of people over 16 years old had been fully vaccinated. Prime Minister Antonio Costa announced 3 phases of staggered elections of restrictions stretching over the next 3 months. From Sunday, localized curfew will end and restrictions on the opening time of restaurants, stores, and cultural venues will be lifted. However, a digital virus pass proving inoculation or a negative test will be needed to enter restaurants on weekend or on public holidays when they are most busy, and for gyms and sport and cultural events.
And in this moment, in which over 50% of the people are vaccinated, is when we can take a step forward, managing the pandemic according to the vaccination rate, because during this wave, it has shown how vaccination is really effective. Less cases, less hospitalizations, and less deaths. So we need to continue with this strategy.
A further 60 million vaccine doses will be made available to African countries under the COVAX system. The news was welcomed by the World Health Organization's regional director from Africa, but it was stressed that it was nowhere near enough.
It would be progress compared to where we are today, but it would not be going far enough. We've estimated that we need about 820 million doses to be able to reach a coverage level of 30% of the population by the end of the year. So 60 million certainly is a step in the right direction, but it is nowhere near what is needed to reach that ambition, that target by the end of the year.
Indonesia has reported a child mortality rate due to the COVID-19 greater than any other country, with hundreds of children having died in the recent weeks. Many of the victims were under the age of 5, challenging the idea of children face minimal risk from COVID-19, doctors said. The news comes as the country confronts its biggest surge yet in coronavirus cases overall, and as its leaders face mounting criticisms that they have been slow to act. The jump in child deaths coincides with the surge of the Delta variant, which has swept through Southeast Asia, where vaccination rates are low, causing record outbreaks. Over 1.6 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in China, according to the information provided by the National Health Commission on Thursday. Multiple regions of the country recently reported locally transmitted COVID-19 cases with the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant. Health authorities reiterate that it's not the time to lower the guard or relax anti-epidemic efforts against the important and local outbreak of cases. Vaccination points have been set up all around China in order to boost the rollout process. China has reiterated that its military forces are ready to respond to any provocation from the United States soon after U.S. warship crossed the Taiwan Strait for the 7th time this year. China accused the United States on Thursday of being the single biggest cause of friction and threats in the Taiwan Strait, while a statement from the People Liberation Army said troops were ready to respond to all threats and provocation and will defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity. Meanwhile, a spokesperson voiced firm opposition to any form of military contact between the U.S. and China's Taiwan region and urged the U.S. government to respect the One China principle. Officials also announced coordinated military drills with Russia set for August, which will see the mobilization to 10,000 troops. China also highlighted on Thursday that the country has been promoting Afghan peace talks on basis of full respect of Afghanistan's sovereignty, while 20 years of foreign intervention has proved to be complete failure.
The hasty withdrawal of the US and NATO forces from Afghanistan marks the complete failure of the Afghan policy of the United States. It must shoulder responsibility for what it has done and mustn't shift the blame and responsibility to others and simply take to its heels. It needs to take concrete actions to prevent the terrorist forces from festering and make sure the withdrawal doesn't lead to turbulence and fighting. It also needs to play its due role in peace and reconstruction in Afghanistan.
We have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. More anger in the West Bank after the Israeli occupation forces kill a 12-year-old Palestinian boy. According to Palestinian authorities, 12-year-old Mohammad al-Alami died after being shot by Israeli soldiers while traveling in a car with his father in the West Bank town of Beit Umar, northwest of Hebron. Alami was the second young Palestinian to be killed by Israel fire in the days after 17-year-old Mohammed Munir al-Tamimi died on Saturday on gunshot wounds inflicted the day before in the Palestinian village of Beita. As Alami's funeral was held, Palestinians expressed their rejection of the occupying forces.
They took my son away from me. Allah suffices me, for he is the best disposer of affairs. This is a terrorist state like no other existed before.
Several hundred people marched in Chad's capital on Thursday against the ruling military junta. The opposition, Transformers Party and civil society groups called the demonstration against the confiscation of power by the so-called Transitional Military Council that has ruled the country since the death of President Idris Deby in April. The damaged a national conference to overhaul the junta's charter on restored democracy in the former French colony. Some protesters held a reading Friends out of Chad. French President Emmanuel Macron met with the new ruler while attending Idris Deby's funeral, the only Western head of the state to make the journey. So the junta has promised free and transparent elections after an 18-month transition that could be extended. It also dissolved parliament and repealed the constitution.
A feeling of satisfaction because we were able to march without any clashes taking place. We have demonstrated, as Max Loengard said earlier, we are mature, we are capable, we are responsible for carrying out a truly peaceful march, which, for once, we have been allowed to do. All the Chadians who came out are demanding justice for everyone. They are calling for a sovereign and inclusive national conference, not like the dialogue that excludes the majority of Chadians. Today, we feel that the CMT wants to stay in power forever, not for 18 months, but for 36 months and maybe for another 30 years.
At least 18 civilians were killed in fresh attack in western Niger near the border with Mali, according to media reports on Thursday. The attack in the Tilaberi region followed a similar one on Sunday that killed 14, without explaining the circumstances of the attack. Of local officials said militants were suspected to be responsible. No group has claimed responsibility. Ramp-up insurgency in the region previously targeted security forces, but this year attacks have targeted civilians amid recent ethnic conflicts. Previous attacks in Tilaberi have been blamed on an affiliate of the terror group Daesh or the Islamic State. The UN mission in Mali reported that peacekeepers repelled 2 attacks starting in a patrol on Wednesday. The mission, which includes over 18,000 personnel, has seen several attacks in recent months as terror groups up their operation in the Sahel region.
The UN mission in Mali reports that yesterday, peacekeepers repelled 2 attacks targeting its patrols. The first took place in Kidal. An armored vehicle was damaged, but there were no casualties. The second attack happened north of Douentza in the Mopti region, in an area where peacekeepers had defused an improvised explosive device earlier in the day. In the past 3 weeks, there have been 15 attacks against peacekeepers in Mali, including 11 that involved improvised explosive devices. 15 mission staff were injured in these attacks, which also caused extensive material damage. Despite these challenges, the mission remains committed to carrying out its mandate and reiterated its support for the full implementation of the peace agreement.
Military junta authorities in Myanmar are seeking help from the international community to tackle the coronavirus as hospitals face collapse. Meanwhile, protests continue against the regime. Myanmar has seen 6 months of turmoil since the military deposed Aung San Suu Kyi's government. The nation is now struggling to beat back a new wave of COVID-19, with many hospitals in equipment to cope with a surging caseload after medical staff walked out in protest over the COP. Authorities are seeking money from COVID-19 response and set up by the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and support from other friendly countries to fight the epidemic. On Thursday, protesters staged a brief flash mob in downtown Yangon, the country's largest city. The Syrian army has launched an operation against terrorist groups in an area of the country's southwest that had been under siege for over a month. The operation on Dera al-Balad, home to some 40,000 people, began early this Thursday after terrorists resisted order to surrender their light weapons and cease hostilities. Authorities state that the offense will be carried out in different stages, seeking to resume the negotiations for the protection of the civilian population. Meanwhile, the terrorists bombarded Dera neighborhoods and the local hospital, destroying medical equipment and supplies. We have come to the end of this new briefs, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website TeleSUR and you can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. Plus, you can catch up on our shows on your YouTube channel. For TeleSUR English, I am Denise Herrera, and thank you for watching.